This video will show you how to build a gaming PC from the very beginning, all the way to installing Windows, tweaking settings in the BIOS, and boosting performance, taking you step by step towards playing your very first game. If this is your first time building a gaming PC, let's establish some of the tools that you will require to complete your build. Essentially, all you need is a Phillips head screwdriver for a mass majority of PC cases and components, but on the rare occasion you want to modify a case, modify PC parts, or you have a really strange screw head on quite a bespoke case, something like our Squad 87 Tech Toolkit can be incredibly useful. It's got all of the attachments needed for taking apart a large range of different technology from Xboxes, smartphones, tablets, and of course, PC parts. And there's convenient storage for all of your different screws so you don't lose them along the way. This is available over on my website and you can grab it for 15% off using this exclusive code that is on screen right now. So it's usually quite normal to not have everything you need to build your PC, especially if it's your first time building. You're definitely going to miss certain components or fans or little screws or something like that. So what I usually like to do is I like to take the time to purchase everything that I think I need for the PC build, get it into the office studio and start taking the case apart. So I get the case out and I assess everything that's included with the case. I also do a fit check for all the components to make sure that the graphic card does fit into the case. You'll be surprised because modern graphics cards are so big, sometimes once the radiators are in, they're too long, or either they're too wide once the power cables are plugged in for the side panels to close, which would then mean if you purchased a load of additional fans and accessories for that particular case, then you had to change case and send it back, you'd be stuck with a load of other items that you didn't necessarily need. So don't be too fearful to just start building the PC. It's normal to sometimes wait a day or so for something else to come in the post. Don't put too much stress on this, just get started and play it by ear.
One day later.
Next, let's talk about fans and have a little bit of a physics lesson as to how these actually work. PC gaming case fans come in a large range of different sizes. 120mm and 140mm are two of the most common. But what you may not be aware of are the different styles of fans and blade types that you can get depending on the position and orientation and the location where you actually install the fan within your PC case. Some of these fan variations include high static pressure fans, airflow fans, and low noise fans for optimizing dB levels. Things like a high static pressure fan is something that you want to place on a radiator or an area in your case where it's got to push a lot of air through a tight environment, whether that be quite a thick filter or something on the case design itself. Then of course, airflow fans are your pretty standard intakes just to get the air circulating around. The front of a fan acts as the intake, and this pulls cold air into the case to cool your components. The rear of the fan is the exhaust, and this will pull hot air out of the case to cool down the ambient temperature. Depending on which way round you place the fan will dictate the direction of the airflow and whether it acts as an intake fan or an exhaust fan. So this is how I'm going to lay the fans out in my case. This is going to be a little bit different because of the shape and style of my case. In a normal PC mid-tower, you might usually have two intake fans on the front that would blow cool air onto your GPU or motherboard. Then you might have an exhaust fan at the top and an exhaust fan at the rear. This would give you a balanced air pressure inside the case because you've got two intake fans and also two outtake fans. There are different types of case pressures that you can intentionally do. You can have a positive or a negative case pressure where you have, more outtake fans or more intake fans, which results in more air being pulled into the case or pushed out of the case, depending on what your intentions are. In this particular example, we're going to try and keep it as balanced as possible with the same amount of intake and outtake fans, and also just because of the way we're going to be mounting my GPU, it's going to be a vertical mounted GPU. So this case has quite a lot of fan mounting options. We can put 3 at the bottom, 2 at the back here, and also 3 at the top. Now the ones at the top are your standard 120 fans, which will be on the radiator of our CPU cooler, but the ones at the bottom are actually 140mm fans, so they're slightly larger. These will have to go upside down, because if we were to place them like this, which would look really pretty because you can see obviously the blades on here, that would look amazing. The problem is, obviously this is intaking air at the current direction that it's pointing, so that's just going to intake a load of air and just throw it down there. So whether that be cooler air or trying to take some of the hot air out the case and outtake it from the bottom, which might look a little bit weird. I think it would be better to put these upside down, and that way it acts as an intake of cool air rather than an exhaust fan. So it's going to pull in cold air from the bottom of the case up onto the GPU, onto the motherboard area, and then we exhaust it out of the top. Because you also have to bear in mind when you have glass panels and side panels on cases, the air will sort of hit and bounce off of those. So you want to make sure that your fans have the maximum amount of pressure going on at any given time. Otherwise, they can lose pressure. If you've got to pull air up and then it hits a right angle and then goes there, we've got to try and pull air out because you've got to remember hot air rises. So you kind of want your exhaust to be at the top
not at the bottom, just so that your fans have an easier life. You can have your fans a little bit quieter, the RPM can be set lower, and so on. So we're gonna have these act as our intake fans, so we'll have 3 of those here. We'll also have an intake on the bottom here, so that means all the cool air is coming in, and then we'll have all of our hot air taken out from the top. We'll have an exhaust there, and then also our radiator up at the top for the CPU cooler.
Whilst I finish preparing my case and installing all of my different fans, let's discuss our CPU cooler. There's different ways you can cool a CPU. You could either have a custom water cool loop, you could have an all-in-one water cooler, or a simple air cooler. In this video, I'm going to be using an all-in-one water cooler, specifically one with a 360mm radiator. You can get different size radiators depending on your case capacity, smaller, bigger, in between. Of course, the larger the radiator, the more cooling capacity the all-in-one water cooler has, and because we're putting in a 24-core CPU inside of this PC, I think we should go on the larger side for our AIO. So this all-in-one water cooler does come included with some fans, and these are RGB fans. Now, throughout this build so far, I've avoided using RGB fans for a few reasons. One, I like the minimalistic look of these simple fans, and I don't want to overdo it so it looks like classy. But also, additional cable management's required when you have a lot of RGB fans. They've got additional headers and splitters and all sorts that you need to route through the case. So for simplicity, I can just have a regular fan with just a little fan connector, job done. But this should be fairly straightforward with the way that these fans link together because they're all ASUS. On the fans themselves, I've got these little motherboard connectors, sort of pins on them. So they just pin and daisy chain together, which minimizes that issue of the excessive amount of cable management that I've had to do in the past when I have used RGB fans. And also, I think with this being at the top of the PC case, it might add a nice splash of ambient lighting to the overall build without us then also needing to get an additional RGB light strip on the sides of the panels and stuff. I think it'll be quite subtle and just enough. Some other additions I added to personalize my PC build were these little stickers over my fans. I'm never a fan of the factory stickers that come on these things. They've got lots of text on them, they're a little bit cluttered, and if the fan's upside down or orientated in a different way, sometimes the text can be upside down or on the side, so it just looks really unneat. But you can order custom stickers on Amazon for around £5, like these ones, and put whatever you want on them, any image, and it's a nice way to add that extra touch to your gaming PC build. So that was a success. We've now got our radiator in the case. I'm not gonna lie, mate. Look at the size of this CPU cooler. I don't think I've ever seen a CPU cooler so big in my entire life. Hopefully it's got some super cool lighting effects on it. I'm actually quite excited to boot this thing up. The final thing we need to do on the topic of booting things up is actually put the power supply into the case and route a few of the cables ready for us inserting our motherboard. A power supply is an area of the PC build that I personally would just never scrimp on. It's so important. It protects your components because it does all of the powering. You don't want dirty power going into them and damaging them, so you have to buy another graphics card because you like try to save like 50 quid or something stupid. But also for fire hazard purposes, there's no point getting a dirt cheap power supply that literally puts you at risk and your household at risk. Also, if you buy a premium power supply, you can use this for many, many years. This Seasonic one here has got a 10-year warranty. So if you buy a half decent one, you can use it in multiple different builds. As you upgrade this system, you got a little bit extra power in there, maybe an extra couple hundred watts than you actually really need in case new graphics cards in the futures are a little bit more power hungry. But also, if you do brew brand new builds, you can just take the power supply out of this build, put it in your next one. I've done that on one power supply I've had almost for 10 years, I would say. I've used it in 2 or 3 builds at this stage, so it's worth purchasing so you don't have to buy another one down the line. Now, before we put this power supply into the case, we're going to put all of the cables into it that we're going to need to use. It's much easier than once it's in there and having to mess around at the back of the case. So because this is a modular power supply, we can choose exactly which cables we need. Whereas if you purchase a slightly cheaper power supply that isn't modular, it'll just have a big bundle of cables that come out the back end, which is fine, but it means cable management is just a little bit of a pain because you've got loads of excess cables that you don't actually need. So with a modular power supply, we just plug in exactly what we require for our PC build, which just keeps everything way more organized at the rear, which is great for also problem solving. If you have any issues with your PC, you can just replace cables and so on. Now, I'm not going to use the stock cables that come included in the box because they look fine, but you know, we're building a premium build here, so we may as well go the extra mile. And I've purchased these from Cable Mods. These are just little mod kits. You can get them for about 60, 80 pounds, something like that. And you can get basically premium braided cables when it comes to your power supply stuff, and these look beautiful. These ones are in red. I just got them in red to show you can get them in different colors. You can get them in white. There's a really nice sort of dark gray that they have, like a graphene gray. I use that quite a lot, but sometimes on camera you can't really see that. It looks like a black cable. And there's blue and etc. I got them in red because it's pretty fiery. And also recently, I remember when cable mods, I had the first ever generation of cable mods when I was like 15 or 16 or something, and they didn't come with these little cable trainers back in the day, so they looked a little bit unneat. They weren't the best. Whereas now they come included with these little cable trainers attached, so you can move these around to train the cable to get the perfect angle on there, so it's not got all the unneat single cables. Like you can see how much of a mess it is on the other end there without the cable trainer. That's how they literally used to look on the front of your PC. So this makes it look a lot neater on the front end and organizes the cables. It gives you more control over the cables rather, much better. So let's kick things off with our motherboard connector. It will be labeled which side goes into the power supply and which end goes into your motherboard. It's usually pretty obvious because the power supply end is split like this, and the one that goes into your motherboard is joined. So you can see obviously this is split. So part 1 goes in there, and then part 2 goes into the wider one. Next, we're going to want to go ahead and get our PSU cable. Now, when it comes to the PSU cable, you need to be careful that you don't accidentally use a PCIe power cable, because they are slightly different, even though they are theoretically the same in terms of what they occupy on a power supply. So again, these cables will usually be labeled up on them. They'll usually say what they're for, like CPU or something on them, especially if they are the ones out the manufacturer. And then for our graphics cards, we've got 2 different options here. We've got the old school sort of PCIe options, or this newer, more modern connection that you find on them RTX 4090s and stuff like that. I'm unsure what connection's actually on my graphics card, so I'll put these to one side for now, and I'll come back to those in a moment. When installing your power supply into the case, you want to make sure that the fan is facing the ventilation area. This will be the holes and grills on your case. This will allow the PSU to pull cold air through the power supply and exhaust it out the back of the PSU. If you put this the wrong way around, you may starve your power supply of cool air because it will be hard up against a solid panel. Once secured, I then route my different power cables to their designated destination, so they are there ready and waiting once the motherboard is positioned into place. Don't worry about doing any cable management just yet. We'll complete that towards the end. So we can now proceed to preparing our motherboard. Now, I like to prepare the motherboard outside of the case because this gives me the opportunity to just basically get everything plugged in without... Can you even see me? I'll maybe not open the box. I'll maybe try it again. So next we can move on to preparing our motherboard. This involves putting in the CPU, the RAM, and also our storage. Now I like to do this outside of the case because you just have more access points with it literally on the cardboard box right here. And then we can just place it into the case as a whole unit. It's just much faster. If you've purchased your motherboard brand new, inside of the box, you'll have a whole bunch of accessories that you can attach to the motherboard. So underneath the little storage compartments here, you can lift out the cardboard, and then there'll be loads and loads of different accessories, cables for, you know, SSD drives and so on. Some stickers that are a little bit pointless. Don't think I've ever used them in my life. But as you can see, if I pull that away, it will reveal all these additional things. SATA cables, Wi-Fi adapter if your motherboard supports Wi-Fi, different covers, various different little USB things, headers for converting stuff, and different brackets depending on how you're orientating the motherboard. I'll take a look at that in a moment, but first I'll actually start preparing the motherboard, and also sometimes your PC case has screws as well that are useful, and we'll just do a bit of a mix between the two of those. A popular method for preparing a motherboard safely is to put it on the cardboard box that it came included in. Now this is because it's more of an anti-static environment and it will ground it. You can also wear like anti-static gloves or little loops that ground your hands. To be honest, no disclaimers here, but I've never used this stuff other than on my first ever PC build because I was like, oh my god, I might break the motherboard, and I've never had any problems. So it's really up to you. As long as you're not building it on a carpet and you've got it on a nice table, like this is a wooden table, put it on the cardboard box, that's going to ground everything and you're going to safely be able to build this. As well, same with your clothes. As long as you're not like a dressing gown or something stupid on that's like creating all this static, should be sound. Practice what I'm preaching here. I'll do it anyways, just for the sake of demonstration, so no one complains in the comment section that I showed you it dangerously, because it's not worth the hassle, kids. It's not worth the hassle, and people in them comments can be quite mean. Motherboards come in all shapes and sizes. You've got MITX, MATX, ATX, and EATX. These different form factors will be dictated by the size of case that you choose and how big you want your PC to ultimately be. The size of motherboard you choose will restrict in the amount of features that are present on the board, such as the amount of PCIe slots, the total RAM capacity, and even SATA connections for your additional storage, such as SSDs and hard drives. The most common motherboard choice is an ATX, which is exactly what I'm using in today's video. Anyways, to kick things off, I'm going to start with the CPU installation while I have the most amount of access. The CPU socket is located right here at the center of the motherboard. We'll be placing it here, and then from there we can build outward. We can then take our heat sinks off and put our NVMe SSD drives in, put those back on, and then obviously go ahead with installing it in the case. Regardless of the brand of processor, the installation will be the same. We're going to take this little latch arm that's held down by this little hook, and we're going to push down and pull it to the side nice and gently and just remove that tension. This will then free the CPU cover here. Now, if your motherboard's brand new, and hopefully if you've purchased it used, the person put this cover back on, but there will be this plastic cover that protects all of the chips. You see all these little processor chips down here on the chipset, all the little pins. This keeps that safe in storage, in transit. It prevents dust getting on there and, of course, them getting bent. You don't want to touch these pins. You don't want to get stuff stuck in these pins. You want to be super careful while installing your CPU here. Now, this cover will automatically eject itself as soon as the CPU is in place. So we're going to leave it on at all times, pull it back, put our CPU in place, and then once we recover it and put the arm back down, boom, it will pop off. Job done. You then want to put this safe back in the box for if you ever resell the motherboard or, switch it out in the future. Now, on a CPU, there will be a little arrow located in one of the corners that tells you which way to put the processor into the motherboard. For example, with this Intel CPU, you can see at that bottom left corner, there's a little arrow, and that arrow corresponds with the CPU cover in this bottom left corner here. So we know that the CPU will go in this way. Basically match these two triangles in the corner. Job done. You're not going to break your processor. Coincidentally, in this example, it just so happens that the text on the processor will also be the correct way round for us to read it. This is not always the case. Sometimes the triangle might be in a different corner, and then the triangle on your motherboard might be in a different corner. So the CPU might actually be on its side. So the text, you can't obviously read it if you're looking straight on in it. So do not assume that just because the text's the right way around, that is the correct way to put it into the socket. Always go off the triangle and match those as the destination. Next, we can proceed onto the installation of our RAM sticks. Now, depending on the generation of motherboard you have, there are different RAM sticks that will be compatible with your motherboard. There's DDR5, DDR4, DDR3 for very old chipsets. Now, you want to make sure that you obviously check this before you purchase your RAM sticks, the compatibility for your motherboard. Another way to tell the difference is by the shape of the RAM sticks. You can see in this example here, we've got both a DDR4 and a DDR5 RAM stick. And you can see there's a massive difference in the layout or pins chipset area of the RAM sticks. So they simply just wouldn't fit on the incorrect motherboard. The ones I've got in today's video are DDR5, and I have got 2 sticks of RAM. Again, depending on the capacity of RAM you choose, you may have 4 sticks of RAM, 2 sticks of RAM, maybe even more if you've got an eATX motherboard, and there's obviously RAM slots on this side of it as well. In today's video, I've just got a simple dual configuration with 2 sticks, and the way we're going to put them in the motherboard is as follows. Now, you would first assume, because we've got 2 sticks of RAM, we would literally put stick 1 in the first channel and then place stick 2 in the second channel. And then maybe in the future, if we upgraded our RAM, we put 1 in 3 and 4. That's simply not how it works in this format of motherboard. You want to put them in adjacent slots, slot 1 and slot 3. This will get the maximum speed, timings, etc. from these slots within your BIOS and motherboard settings. Now, of course, if you do have 4 channels of RAM, you would just occupy 1, 2, 3, 4, fill it all out. And if you have a smaller motherboard, like a MATX or an ITX that only has 2 slots of RAM, you would, of course, put them next to each other. To place your RAM sticks into their correct channel, you want to release the clamps on either side of the channel, like so. Just press those down. One final thing before you insert the RAM stick into your motherboard is just triple checking that you've got it the correct way around. If we just literally align this on its side just to triple check, you can see this little notch is central here, and it's going to go in without any issues. But if I flip this stick round, you'll then notice that we are out of alignment with this little notch. So if I were to try and put this in, it just simply wouldn't fit. So to save you from having to take it back out or force it in like a bit of a fool, we're just going to flip it round, make sure that that's correct, and then go ahead with the final fitment. And then we can just literally put it in place, press down on both sides, and it'll just click like so. Job done. And then we repeat for the second one. Remember, we're going to leave this second channel empty because we're running dual channel RAM here and we want to get maximum speeds. We're going to do the little fitment check just to triple check that's the correct way around. And then we can go ahead, slot that in, and press down nice and gently. Job done. In a gaming PC, you can have many different types of storage. There's NVMe SSD drives, SATA SSD drives, and a good old hard drive. Hard drives are a little bit dated at this point. They have very slow read and write speeds, and that's because they have a physical mechanical disk inside of them that has to spin in order to access the data. This old school design has a few reliability issues. One, a hard drive has a lifespan. Once it's exceeded its maximum amount of spins on that disk, it will break and lose all of the data. Plus, because there is a physical disk spinning inside of it, you can hear them during operation, so they can be quite loud. The advantages of a hard drive are the fact they are very, very cheap. You can get a lot of storage, thousands and thousands of gigabytes for only £100 or so, which makes them very useful for mass storage. I do still use them in some of my PCs for storing a lot of video footage on them. On average, every year, I create around 15,000 gigabytes to 20,000 gigabytes of 4K footage for making all my videos. So hard drives do act as a great way for me to store this on the cheap. However, for a gaming PC, you want things to be a little bit faster. A faster drive can result in better performance within your applications and games, and also it reduces loading screen times. A step up from a hard drive is a SATA SSD. These usually have read and write speeds around 540 megabytes a second, and a few years ago, these were the gold standard. They were lightning fast compared to hard drives, and because they don't have a disk spinning inside of them, their reliability is almost unlimited. You can now get SATA SSDs for much cheaper compared to around 10 years ago because they've kind of became the new hard drive. Because compared to NVMe SSD drives, they are kind of slow. This is a Gen 4 NVMe SSD drive, and you can get read and write speeds up to 7,300 megabytes a second, over 10 times faster than a SATA SSD. These are perfect for boot drives, installing Windows on them, and some of your favorite games. But this speed does come at a slight premium and can cost a little bit more than SATA SSDs. However, with the recent introduction of Gen 5 NVMe SSD drives, which boosts the speeds up to around 14,000 megabytes a second, doubling Gen 4, there has been a huge drop in price points for these Gen 4 drives, making them almost comparable to some SATA SSDs on the market.
So when it comes to installing your NVMe SSD drives, these will plug directly into the motherboard. Now, depending on the generation you choose, whether you go for a Gen 5 or a Gen 4, you want to make sure that you plug that into the correct and compatible M.2 slot. So right here's the Gen 5 slot on our motherboard. Something really cool about this Asus motherboard that I've never actually seen on other motherboards that I've reviewed recently is this quick release system. That's insane. You just literally remove the latch on there, and like just release the catch and lift it straight off. Plug your NVMe SSD drive in there. There's also this little adjuster here that lets you just slide that around. So again, you don't need to put a screw in. Normally you take the cover off and then undo a screw, slot your NVMe drive in, and then put the screw back in. But that's quite a nice little tool-free adjuster. And then you literally go ahead and plug that straight back in. Now that's where I'm going to put my Gen 5 SSD, which are the insanely quick ones. I'm going to have a 1 terabyte Gen 5 plugged into there that's going to have my Windows operating system on there, so everything loads in really fast, and just a little bit of extra storage for my software and maybe one game or two that I really want to have on the faster drive. Down here underneath this heatsink is where we will have our Gen 4 SSD drive. Now the current screwdriver attachment that I've got is way too big for these screw heads. It's going to obviously strip them, which we don't want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the other tools that I've got available within here and get something just a little bit smaller. Perfect, that should do the job. Then we can take this cover off. When you retighten this cover later on, you don't want to do it too tight. It's very easy to strip the heads and also strip the threads on these really small motherboard screws because they're very tiny in terms of their thread depth. So you just want to be very delicate with them. We can then peel this cover away to reveal our additional NVMe SSD slots. Now you can see that this motherboard has 3 extra ones that we can fill out. So I could fill these out with 4 terabyte drives, which I probably will do. Today I'm just going to put a little 1 terabyte drive in here, so I've got one, but in the future I'm going to get my hands on a few extra ones. So I could fill this out with 4 terabyte NVMe SSD drives in each of these trays here, giving me a total of around 12 gigabytes of additional storage on top of my main master boot drive. I'd use these NVMe SSD drives for games, for media, for different things that I need to access when I'm editing videos, and so on, so stuff operates very, very fast. So to place your NVMe SSD drive into your motherboard, it's very simple. You literally just align the little chip sockets with the slot. You don't want to put it in the wrong way around. You can see that that just simply wouldn't fit. You just simply align it in like that, click it in, and then you just go ahead and you push it down. Now, traditionally on a lot of motherboards, you would go ahead and place the NVMe SSD down like this and then tighten up a screw to hold it in place so it doesn't sit up like that all of the time. But this Asus motherboard's got a very cool quick release system. This little latch here, you press down put the NVMe SSD drive into place and then release that latch and it holds it completely toolless, which is fantastic. And then you can put the heatsink over it. So you can see on the back of here, you would peel back this sticky tape. You would leave the heat shroud on, but you would just remove this little blue sticker, and then this will stick on top of your NVMe SSD drive. And then once you've got all of your storage in place, you can proceed and put the cover back on and screw it back down. Remember, you don't want it to be tight, you just want to be delicate with this, so just enough to hold it in place and have a nice spread, even coverage of distribution of tensions. The installation process is the same for our Gen 5 drive. At the top here, we're going to remove the heatsink. We then want to make sure that we take off the little blue film on the actual heat pads themselves. Leave the heat pads on, take this blue sticker off, otherwise it's not going to work the heat pad. You're going to have a piece of plastic there that's going to basically sort of melt onto your drive. So we want to make sure we remove that off of our thermal pads, take those off nicely, and then we can install our drive into here. Go ahead and also take off the protection sticker off of our thermal pad on the top of the heatsink, and then go ahead and install it back onto the motherboard. And now that our motherboard is completely prepared, we can go ahead and insert this into the case and proceed onto our CPU cooler and graphics cards. So we can now proceed onto installing our motherboard. To do this, I'm going to lay the case down on its side. Then that way we're not fighting against gravity. Make sure none of these cables get caught or snagged on the side of the case. So you don't damage anything, place it down precisely. But I see some people try and install motherboards with the case stood up, and you just look like a bit of a dork, mate, trying to do that, because you are battling against physics. Got it on its side, so all the weight is now lying down on the table. So all we have to do is just literally drop the motherboard into place and screw it in. Whereas if we had it still stood up, we'd have to sort of try and balance the motherboard whilst grabbing the screws and fitting it in whilst bending over the case like this. You make your life difficult for no reason at all. Before we actually put the motherboard in, we want to prepare the area of the case first. So we're going to remove the CPU cooler's head out of the way so it doesn't get caught on anything and damage our motherboard. Get that out as far as possible. These motherboard cables, we might even potentially just thread them back through a little bit. Make sure everything's up and out the way so this is as clear as possible. We can then grab our motherboard. There's a couple of things you may want to remove first. You can see on this motherboard, it's got some stickers. We're going to leave these stickers on for now because they prevent it from getting fingerprints and scratches on there. We'll take those off just before we do the first boot. But on the back of the I/O shield, we also have a sticker. So we want to make sure we take this sticker off the I/O shield first because we might catch the little head of the sticker, so we can't peel it off once it's in place as easily. So we take that off now because this is going to be the final time we'll be handling the I/O shield. We're going to go ahead and tease this in nice and gently. Make sure it's not getting any tension on it at any point. On a case, there will be a little header somewhere that's almost like a central point that catches on the motherboard to ensure it is seated perfectly central, and then you'll just sort of move it around a little bit. There we go, and then you feel it just almost like click, it just beds down. Then from there, that means all of your holes are perfectly aligned with the screw inputs, and you can just go ahead and grab a screwdriver. Before we do that though, I've observed already that we have lost access to our CPU power cables here and also some of our fan headers in the top right corner. And this is being covered up by our radiator. Now, in some cases, you would have to take the radiator completely off if you've got like a cheap case that doesn't give you much flexibility. Luckily, this case is very well designed. Everything's on brackets. So these three fans here are bracketed, so they come off as one whole unit. And this radiator area also comes off as one whole unit. So I don't have to take out like 10 or 12 screws or whatever that we put in earlier to install that. There's about 2 screws that we can take off that will remove this entire bracket off the case to relieve access in this area here. So what we'll do is we'll put some of the motherboard screws in now, and then we'll proceed and take this off in order to unlock access at these top left corners and plug in our power cables. So we want to get these in, do it a little bit like you would install anything, you know, just adjacent screws, one here, one there, usually one up there, one there, one there. And that means tension's always even across the board at all times, but also you're not going to misalign any of these screw heads. They're always just going in evenly. It's also very advantageous here to have a screwdriver with a magnetic head at this stage, because when you present the screw up to the motherboard, it means it isn't falling off. You can like lower it down nice and accurately. So let's lift the case back up to take this radiator bracket out, get those final couple of screws in, and also plug in some of our power cables. Now, as I was just talking about, you can see on this case that we've actually got just 2 little simple screws. Take these 2 screws out here, but you can see there we removed those 2 screws, and now this slides free. So we can literally just take this out, just like that, boom, remove it, super carefully, and we now have full access to our motherboard. Next, we're going to plug in our power cables for our motherboard, starting with the 24 pin, which is the biggest one, and then heading over to the top corner for our CPU pins. Depending on what processor you've got and also motherboard will depend how many power cables are required, but it's sort of fairly obvious when you get to this stage. Don't worry about cable managing it just yet. We'll do that right at the end of the build. Just keep it relatively organized. So before we put the radiator back onto our case and install the CPU, there's a few more essential cables we need to plug in to our motherboard. These include things such as the front I/O, the USB ports, power switches, reset switches. And this is probably my least favorite part of the PC build. Not because it's difficult, just because it's just a little bit finicky, and you'll see why. So this down here is the region of the motherboard that I'm referring to. We're going to be plugging in all of the different headers into this section here. Now, the reason why this gets a little bit difficult is because every motherboard's slightly different in terms of its layout of the reset switch, the power switch, and different things like that. So you often have to sometimes reference the manual if you've got a cheap board that isn't labeled, or you got to get your reading glasses on. Luckily, I've got some strong prescriptions, so they're like binoculars, mate. Luckily, on most motherboards, there is text on here to tell you exactly what is plugging in where. Now, luckily, because this is a high-end case, they've actually bundled the front panel connectors all together. Sometimes on cheaper cases, these are just separate individual single cables. But the way we're going to install this into our motherboard is as follows. You can see on the front panel connector, it's got a little blank space in the bottom corner. We want to make sure that we go to the blank pin and align that. So we're going to flip this over and present it onto the motherboard, and then it should just nicely just slot on. Obviously, if it isn't, you've most likely probably got the connector the wrong way around. Now, if your case does have single cables for each of these pins on the motherboard, you want to reference my video from last year, because in that PC build, that case was a little bit older and it didn't have fancy one-pin connector like this. So you can check that video out here for more details if you're struggling with this stage of the build. We break down the differences between the positive and the negative and all that type of stuff for the power switches. Next, we've got our HD audio. This looks exactly the same as the front panel connector, but you'll notice that the pin is not on the bottom right corner, it's just on the second square to the bottom right corner. So if we look for this HD audio on our motherboard, you'll see that it's actually located here at the bottom left of our case. So this means that we are going to have to flip our case up on its side and reroute this cable from this cable channel in through this one, just to make the cable management a little bit easier. So what I'll do is I'll put this cable to one side for now, get it out the way, and we'll do that in a moment. Next up, we've got our USB connectors, our Type-C and our USB 2.0 or 3.0, one of the O's, who knows? Sings a song, sounds like she's singing. Ooh, baby, ooh, I said ooh. Now we can proceed to installing our CPU cooler and our GPU. We're pretty much almost finished this PC at this stage. This is the final push. So, we're not going to put my radiator in just yet, as we've already established throughout this build, it's blocking some of our connections at the top of our motherboard. Even though we have already plugged in our power cords for our CPU, we still need to access this area of the motherboard for our extra fan headers and also power for the pump on our all-in-one water cooler. So we want to make sure we connect those first, then place anything back into its position that may block that access. With your CPU cooler will be a bunch of accessories, such as a bracket, which will be attached at the rear of the motherboard for holding the CPU cooler in place. And there'll also be some adapters. These adapters will be depending on the brand of CPU that you have installed, whether you've got an AMD socket or an Intel socket. You may need to use the adapters to obviously convert that. Sometimes CPU coolers come installed ready for AMD CPUs, and other times they come installed for Intel CPUs, so you have to use the brackets here. Now this is ready to rock and roll for an Intel chipset, so we won't need these, so we can put these to one side for the AMD setup. Now it's time to answer the biggest debate in PC gaming: thermal paste coverage. Do you do a dot or a cross? It's proven that both do pretty much the same coverage across the surface area of your CPU. I personally prefer doing a cross. This, in my opinion, works better, especially on larger CPUs, to make sure it does even and great coverage, but either or is perfectly fine. If you have bought a brand new CPU cooler, it is most likely that it does come pre-prepared with some thermal paste already on it, so you could just use that. You then want to put these little spacers onto the bracket and present the cooler up to the screw heads, evenly tightening it down at all four corners. Once secured, you can connect the pump to the motherboard and also any additional cables for RGBs. And now the moment we've all been waiting for: installing our GPU. So I think I was wrong about something in this video. At the start of the vid, I said I wanted to get a graphics card that was smaller and more practical than an RTX 4090.
I think the 4080 Super is bigger. Look at this thing. It's absolutely huge. Luckily, we're going to be vertically mounting this graphics card, so it's going to be sat like this in the case. Otherwise, I think sideways on, it would maybe be a little bit too wide. Wasn't expecting that, mate. Not at all. Usually installing a graphics card consists of plugging it into the top PCIe slot. This is usually the fastest slot on the motherboard, giving you the best performance from your GPU. It kind of clicks into place like a RAM stick, similar premise. But in this video, we're going to be vertically mounting our graphics card, which uses this unique adapter. We will be using a riser cable that will add an extension to our PCIe slot. This is actually a Gen 5 riser cable that came included with the case. Then with this fancy bracket, we can plug in our GPU vertically. There are some cons to having a vertically mounted graphics card. First is it does block all the other PCIe lanes on the motherboard. So if you wanted to add capture cards or other things, you can't because your motherboard's completely blocked by your GPU. But the big pro is aesthetics. It looks bloody awesome, mate. And also, it's much better for the graphics card's health because it doesn't sag as bad. Modern graphics cards are so big. They're also very heavy, which can cause GPU sag and put quite a lot of strain on your motherboard's PCIe lane. These vertically mounted brackets have much better weight distribution for the GPU to sit comfortably inside of the case. The final step is to plug in our graphics card's power cables, and we can now proceed onto booting up our system. You might be a little bit nervous about pressing that power button for your first time boot. Don't worry, it's gonna be all good. For me, I'm gonna go ahead and do some quick cable management and prepare the case. This is because I am experienced at building gaming PCs, and I'm fairly confident it's going to work first time, and I won't have to dismantle the case again to fix anything or re-plug in different cables. You will need to install an operating system onto your computer. I'm of course going to use Windows 11, with this being the latest and greatest hardware. To get the files for installing your operating system, you want to go over to the official Windows website, and then you can download a boot manager. Essentially, you just grab a USB stick, install a little 4GB file onto that USB stick, then you plug that into the back of your computer, and we are going to boot from this USB stick to then install the operating system onto our NVMe SSD drive. But first, we need to go into our BIOS. There's multiple ways to do this. You can either spam the F1 key to open the boot menu, or spam the delete key on your keyboard while your PC is still booting and posting. This will then launch you into the BIOS. In here, you can see all of the advanced details about your computer, what processor it's running, how much RAM sticks it's got, the graphics card, and so on. And it's a great place to tweak the speed of your fans and also make sure everything's working correctly. Before we overclock our RAM and enable XMP to unlock their full speeds, we first want to install Windows just for the best reliability possible. Some tutorials on the internet show you, oh, enable XMP now and then install Windows. That's completely wrong. Overclocking the RAM could potentially cause instability, which then could corrupt your installation of Windows. So I'm currently installing Windows 11 onto my gaming PC. Of course, this is not going to be my final gaming setup. This is just the monitor and stuff that I had lying around the studio and a mouse and keyboard just to get this up and running. First, going to install Windows, and then we're going to jump back into the BIOS, update the BIOS, and also tweak advanced settings to get the most performance out of our RAM and other things that we may need to enable and also disable to maximize the gaming performance from our CPU. You then follow the instructions on screen and tick whichever boxes you feel comfortable. Name your computer, log into your Windows account. Don't worry if you have multiple Windows accounts. For example, you have an email address you use for your Xbox, which is different to the one you want to use on this computer. You can log into your Xbox account separately later on in order to access Game Pass for PC and all of your purchases on the Xbox store. So if you do want to create a new account for your new computer, go ahead and do that, or use your old Microsoft account. Do whatever you want to do. I'm not here to tell you what to do, mate. I'm just some dude on the internet making a video. On the rarest occasions when installing Windows, there is a glitch where it doesn't let you connect to the internet, so you can't click next to install the software. This is often because your motherboard hasn't got the right drivers on or something random. And even if you plug in an Ethernet cable into the back of your motherboard, it still won't register that there's internet connected to it, which can be really annoying. If you use the shortcut Shift F10, this will boot up a little script prompt area where you can type in a custom script. You can get that on Reddit if you need to. But usually just by triggering this shortcut, it will then automatically install the driver for your motherboard, and it will give you the access to click allow to proceed with it, and then boom, job done. You can click next, connect to your internet, no problem, and install Windows without any issues. Once we are inside of Windows, we then want to install our final set of drivers. Update your motherboard, update your BIOS, update anything else your motherboard wants you to do. Usually the manufacturer's website will boot up automatically and say, oh, update available, and you just click download all if you want to, or you can pick the specific ones that you want. And then finally, the most important driver is going to be our graphics card. If you've got an NVIDIA GPU, you want to go and download something called GeForce Experience. This will give you a nice little dashboard to optimize all of your games and also access the latest drivers. Also, inside of GeForce Experience are some additional tools such as FPS counters to monitor the performance of your graphics card to check it's all performing okay. And also, my favorite is the screen recording feature. To boot up the NVIDIA GeForce Experience dashboard, you use the shortcut Alt-Z, and you can access all of the parameters in there whenever you're inside of a game. A pro tip for speeding up your computer is disabling some of the startup apps. By default, Windows will enable a load of stuff that you don't necessarily want to use every single time you turn on your computer. Luckily, we can dive into our master settings, go down to applications, and disable some of these startup apps. You can see each app is ranked with how much impact it has on the overall boot time: high impact, medium impact, and low impact. We can turn some of these off that we don't want to use, resulting in a way faster PC experience, and also it becomes more responsive as soon as you log into your desktop. Final thing we need to do is jumping back into the BIOS and enabling XMP. This is going to overclock our RAM sticks and ensure that they run at their fastest possible speed, because by default, straight out of the box, they will run as slow as they possibly can, regardless of the motherboard and also the RAM compatibility that you've purchased. Simply just turn this setting on, save and exit, and now your PC is pretty much good to go. You can take this one step further and do some overclocking. A lot of motherboards now have AI overclocking, so it does the hard work for you, and just squeeze out a little bit extra performance out your CPU. And to avoid damaging any other of your components in the future, you should check out this video next, where I break down 10 PC mistakes that you should avoid.